Oh, did this kick me out? Yep. So it is 7:03 and we'll call this council meeting to order in the township of Leeds in the Thousand Islands. And we will all rise for the playing of O Canada. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Counselor Maybe, seconded by Counselor Jameson, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Next item is declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Does anybody have an interest to declare? Seeing none, we'll move forward with in-camera session, which there is no in-camera session, and number 6, which is consent agenda. So the adoption and or receipt of minutes. So moved by Counselor Maybe, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that the July 10th, August 24th, and September 5th, 2023 public meeting minutes be adopted as circulated, and that the July 10th, 2023 council meeting minutes, August 24, 2023 special council meeting minutes, and September 5th, 2023 committee of the whole meeting minutes be adopted as circulated, and that the June 27th and July 25th, 2023 committee of adjustment meeting minutes be received and filed. Any errors or omissions in all of those minutes? Please go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I noticed on the September 5th, it had a motion there and it has Councillor Jackie as the one of the representatives, Jackie instead of Lackey.
Okay, fair
Okay.
enough. That will make that clerical change.
And then I don't know whether we got to the other one, which was on August 24th. Did we talk about that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
On SR 13823 appointment to United Counties, there's no second to that motion. I made the motion, but there's no seconder listed.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll go back and correct those minutes. So any further errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? It's carried. Okay. Next item. Staff reports. That. Just wanted to make sure, sorry. Motion comes forward from Councillor Jameson, seconded by Counselor Maybe, that the council approve the staff reports as recommended at the September 5th, 2023 committee of the whole meeting. Any comments to be made on the staff reports as presented? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's carried. Next items are information items. So there's a number of information items, and I'm going to put the motion on the floor that the information items be received and filed, and we can have a chat about any of them that anybody wants to pull, if that's the will of council, and then we'll amend the motion at that time. So moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the information items be received and filed. Are there any comments or questions on any of the information items that are provided? Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me, through you. 9.1, 9.3, and 9.5. Thank you.
So do you want to please make the points known, and then we'll see if they're what we need to do with them, if anything.
Excuse me. With regards to the 9.1 from Edwardsburg Cardinal, it's delay the implementation is the point of this notice brought forward by them of the agricultural land evaluation area review until 2026 official plan review. I think that's legitimate in what I've seen. Having been a farmer in my past, when I look at the prime agricultural land, it's a little gray in that it states in this mapping that they've identified, but there's other areas that haven't been identified for this, that, or the other reason. Is it black or is it white? So I think there needs to be a little clarity here. There's a little bit of a smoke and a screen going on here. And I think some farmers are going to be lulled into one side or the other, believing the opposite. And I think maybe perhaps that's what Edwardsburg Cardinal is asking for here. Just a little more time to evaluate.
So if I can make some comments in regards to that, we had a planning meeting at the county level last Wednesday morning. And this was the subject of a presentation of the consultant that was hired to do this review. It became very apparent by all members of council that this is something that feels rushed, and we are not in favor of it being rushed. There's a total of 2,000 individual properties that could be affected by the proposed land changes. It was decided that it was recommended that the planner come back to council with the costs associated with notifying each landowner with those properties that could be affected by this change, that they would be notified. And it really comes down to the fact that this process is rushed and nobody around the table is feeling particularly good about it. The other thing that was discussed was the fact that if you have rural land and perhaps you're not productively farming it, it means that you may not be a member of the Federation of Agriculture or CFFO. There's some challenges with that, because if you're using those groups as the main mechanism to reach out to those people, they're not necessarily members, because if it's going from rural to prime ag, they may not even be farming the land. So I can confidently say that this is definitely, we don't know what it's going to cost to inform those 2,000 people, but it was very apparent at that meeting that nobody's willing to move forward without that kind of notification. So as far as the timing, I don't see this process being over anytime soon, because even if they were to come back with the costs associated with notifying the 2,000 people, they actually have to do it. Then they have to receive the comments back from those and have public meetings from that point of view. So it's certainly not going to be finalized before the end of this year. The 2026, I think it was 2026. Yes. That is a bit excessive. This does need, there's purposes, nothing's been reviewed since 1948. So there's definitely some need to make sure that things are right. However, people need to know ahead of time before things change on their property. We can't use the excuse, oh, you should pay attention to the notice in the newspaper that very few people read anymore. So unless you want to make a notice of motion for our own motion or a resolution of support, that's entirely up to you.
Thank you. I think a resolution of support, Edwardsburg Cardinal has made their statement. I think it's legit. I don't have a problem if, to their wording that we time this into the official plan. If this moves a little faster, fine. But as you had stated, your worship, it needs to be more accurate. I looked at lands that I know well that used to be non-productive, that have actually gone into full production. Not 3 miles from this very building is some of the best corn and soybeans this year, and that land isn't even in there classed as prime agricultural. Contrary, I followed up on a request here on Sunday and attended a very productive farm that now those people are retirement with a lot less activity on the farm. The only reason there's less activity is because of their retirement age. I think the moment that that farm should sell, it'll be right back into full production again. So I think there needs to be some explicit details passed on as to what it is that qualifies and what don't qualify. And the few farmers I have spoke to were a little suspicious. Is this tied to agricultural taxing? Farm taxes, we all know, is a different tax than most any other tax. So that's just a hypothetical guess on the parts of some.
I haven't heard anything to that particular vein, but I'm not sure what anybody's ulterior motives may or may not be. So,
Oh, I think it's a given.
so that's 9.1 and 9.3, which is the Mapleview Lodge, St. Lawrence Lodge Municipal Operating Subsidies. I'm going to ask you to speak to these before we change this motion. That way I know which way we're going with them. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I was going to ask for your clarity on this because this motion here states that they are basically waiting for the county. I should have underlined this because now I'm looking for it. They're waiting for a response from United Counties Leeds Grenville on resolution 19323. And which is their first motion here on page 1. It indicates that on the bottom from Township Elizabethtown Kitley, now therefore be it resolved that the Corporation of Township Elizabethtown Kitley provide $100,000 towards Sherwood Park Manor's legacy of care in the next 50 years capital fundraising campaign to be provided at the rate of $20,000 a year over 5 years. They're basically saying that they want some clarity as to what the county is going to do with response. I'm reading that they as a municipality don't want to commit till they know what the county is clarifying. Is there such a stance from the counties?
So it's a little bit more complex than that. So I'll try to boil it down as fast as I can. So the municipality of Elizabethtown Kitley is holding off committing any donations to the Mapleview Lodge, St. Lawrence Lodge operating not operating subsidies. The fundraising that's happening for Mapleview Lodge, you all heard the presentation that was here a couple of months ago. They are fundraising for the extras, not the essentials. So things that make things more comfortable, whether it be seating, whether it be lighting, whether it be pictures on the wall, naming of wings and that sort of thing to make things that much nicer for the residents of the long-term care facility. However, what has been stuck in the craw of the Committee of Management, of which I sit on, has been the subsidy that the county operates Mapleview Lodge with. And historically, the municipal subsidy to run the lodge is $3 million. When this project was undertaken many moons ago and long before I was mayor here, when they first started out, the whole purpose of going from a 60 bed to 192 bed facility was that the operating subsidy would not exceed $3 million based on, that's what we've already put in the kitty already, but we would have essentially 3 times the amount of beds. 3 times. So the issue is now it's come forward that Sherwood Park Manor is operating on a zero budget with zero subsidy. So Elizabethtown Kitley has challenged both St. Lawrence Lodge and Mapleview Lodge to operate with a zero at a zero budget. However, upon more, and I'm all for this exercise because I think that there's things that need to be addressed before we go down the finalize the model of care for Mapleview Lodge. However, you cannot compare a municipally run home to a not-for-profit home. There are extenuating differences. I don't know what they are yet. There is a presentation that's coming forward that apparently went to the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus by an independent person who shows the differences. So getting back to the nub of the question here. Township of Elizabethtown Kittley is really just interested in the county making the effort to reduce the overall deficit. And I'll be quite honest, based on the presentation for the model of care to date, it's not even at $3 million. It's at $5 million. And I, along with a couple of the other members, have stuck their oars in the water saying it's not acceptable. So we're not there yet. On the operating side, this was always my concern when we approved the new build, that we didn't have the operational stuff nailed down, but here we are, and I am doing my darndest to make that happen. However, so Elizabethtown Kittley came to our committee of Brant Borough presented at Committee of Management on Thursday last week. And basically it's more of a nudge to do things, to look at things a little bit differently. Because if one home is able to do it at a zero, and how can they do it? And they're still providing excellent care, according to them. So the challenge has been put out there, and they haven't said they won't support Mapleview Lodge. They just want to do it in a way that is respectful of the efforts that Sherwood Park Manor has made. Because if anybody knows any history on Sherwood Park Manor, they were about to close. It was they had to do a bunch of fundraising. The mortgage was due, the whole bit. It was quite a tough time in the community. The community rallied, but it really came down to the board of directors who managed their way out of that and did a great job. So there's that. I don't know if that helps or hinders, but anyways. And then the last one you wanted to talk about was 2022 Municipal Property Assessment Corporation post enumeration report.
Yes. And then again, I was going to task into your attendance at AMO because I know it overlapped up there, and I'll put you on the hot seat. I don't think there's any municipal council member anywhere that isn't disappointed with the lack of action by the province. And my own personal feeling, I doubt they could give me a reason for not moving forward with a new tax assessment that would satisfy me. I'm absolutely baffled as to why the stagnation. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So that particular post enumeration report isn't specific to that, but I think to your point, speaking to MPAC and the change in assessment or lack thereof, there's no appetite at this point. And it will be up to municipal councils across the province to manage within that framework, because we're not getting a phase in at this point. And it's getting to be a very old question that's being asked consistently and persistently. I sense some frustration even with MPAC because they're getting the question as well. They are continuing to go about their business. They are ready to change, to put a phase in at any given time. They just need the trigger to be pulled at the provincial level. So go ahead.
To really put you on the spot, your worship, has the provincial government given a legitimate answer as to why they have not?
No.
So,
It was COVID previously, but as of now, unless the treasurer has anything to add to that.
Through your worship, no, I've heard nothing since, like you said, originally it was a COVID measure to give people a break. And they haven't provided any reasoning since.
And I think in light of interest rates and all the other challenges facing household incomes, inflation, and you name it, I think that, put it out there, it's political suicide for them if they do it. But it puts it on us.
I was going to say, that's all fine if the provincial government wants to pick up the difference on the cost of snowplows, road graders, building assessments and such. But to put your head in the sand proves nothing. Thank you.
Won't disagree with that. So I'll hear from other members and then it sounds like we want to pull the agricultural land evaluation for a resolution of support. But is there any other comments or questions to be made on any of them? Go ahead, Councillor Kelman.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, nothing against the recommendation. I just particularly noted in 9.4 in the AMO report, the section on electronic permitting. I found that very interesting, especially as there is a bylaw enforcement module, something that perhaps we can look at down the line.
I think that the Director of Planning will have something coming forward here in the next year or so to actually potentially deal with that.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you.
so you're just right on top of it. That's good. Any other comments or questions in regards to the information items? So the motion that's on the floor is that the information items be received and filed, and I'm going to need an amendment, save 9.1 Township Edwardsburg Cardinal. That one, and then we'll bring that forward for a resolution of support. Okay. So the amendment will be that the information items be received and filed except 9.1 Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal. Okay. So who would like to make that amendment? Lackey and Baby. Okay, I'll vote on the amendment to take out 9.1 Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal UCLG agricultural land evaluation and area review. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? And it's carried. So the amended motion reads that the information items be received and filed except 9.1 Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal UCLG agricultural land evaluation and area review. All those in favor of the motion at hand? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay, so with that, resolution of support comes from Deputy Mayor Fody. And who would like to second? So I'll recognize Councillor Lackey. That TLDI support provide. Oh, that's why we have a good clerk. So the motion reads that the council support the resolution of the council of the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal regarding the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville delay of implementation of the agricultural land evaluation area review, and that the copy of this resolution be circulated to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and all municipalities in Leeds and Grenville for their support. So that motion comes forward from Deputy Mayor Fody and seconded by Councillor Lackey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Next item. Next motion comes from Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Jameson. The council support the request from FO10 Planning and Design for a 1-year extension for draft approval of the plan of subdivision submitted by Greens Electric Plumbing and Heating Limited. Motion is on the floor and up for discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to the planner. I understand this is just a renewal of just in case, but I have seen equipment on the property. So is there something perhaps going to be done soon?
Through you. So because this is a renewal of draft plan, they haven't got any final plan approval, so there wouldn't be any construction, but it's likely that they're doing some drilling for geotechnical or hydrogeological reports. So it's just a product of the fact that it's been difficult to get consultants and the amount of work that they need to do is quite extensive. So it's taking time to complete it.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Any other questions in regards to this? Councillor, maybe go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, with this 1-year extension that we did do last year, they're asking for another one. Is there a possibility of another one coming our way? Or as Councillor Lackey also indicated, I've seen some work being done on the site. I actually had the next door neighbor actually question me on it also, on whether something is starting there, and it looks like it is. Now on the plan, it also looks like there's some changes that have been maybe indicated, and that the new study might indicate something more that needs to happen to the planned layout of how it's all going about.
Madam Planner?
Through you, this is a very old draft plan of subdivision.
Yeah.
So in terms of the studies that they're doing and any final approvals and any zoning that would be required, it's all gonna have to be brought up to current day standards. So we haven't seen any of the updated studies, any updated plans or reports, but I would assume that there are likely going to be some substantive changes to the actual draft plan that was actually approved, which may necessitate it going through another draft plan process, given all of the conditions. But until we see some of those reports and have some of that information in hand, I don't know any of the answers.
Just as a follow-up, was there any indication by the applicant on when they might start building if they get everything, all their ducks in a row?
Through you, if hopefully within the next year, we have the draft plan approval and everything completed as it relates to this, which would necessitate going through a final plan approval. Again, without having more information, I can't speak to what the plan is here, so I don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth.
Counselor Lackey, did you have your hand up? Nope. Anybody else? Any questions on this? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay. Next item, Deputy Mayor, moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey or Deputy Mayor Fody. Sorry, it's getting later. Seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the council approve the bylaw attached to this report as Exhibit A to stop up, close, and convey at fair market value the unopened road allowance located within concession 2, parts lot 10, lot 11, former township in front of Leeds and Lansdowne, and that the applicant provide a reference plan of the lands to be conveyed, prepared by a qualified surveyor at their expense, and that the applicant provide the design and complete construction of a cul-de-sac at the end of Cheeseborough Road to the township's satisfaction as detailed in development agreement. That the applicant obtain any necessary approvals from external agencies for works within the subject road allowance and creation of the abutting cul-de-sac. And further, that the applicant provide the township with land appraisal for the property to determine the value of land. Land value is established in the appraisal, and any other costs incurred by the township to complete the land transaction are to be paid for by the applicant. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead. Councilor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, it refers to the cul-de-sac again, and this particular road is a drive-through road with a corner at the existing house that's on the road. So I'm wondering why there's a cul-de-sac and what its purpose might be if it's already a drive-through road.
Are you going to put the map up, Marnie? Okay. So we'll get the map up here so that we're all singing from the same song sheet. There we go. Can you zoom that at all in, please? Thank you. There we go.
Through you, what's proposed, this portion of the road allowance? Sorry, this is the portion of the road allowance that's proposed to be closed. What the applicant is suggesting is that Cheeseborough Road then be made into a cul-de-sac at this location, which would be reviewed through the development agreement, which is noted in the proposed bylaw. The construction of a cul-de-sac in this location would then create frontage for this property, which currently has no public road frontage. This is not an open road allowance in this location.
Sorry, as a follow-up, that you just pointed as not open, but it is a road and they use it all the time.
This is Cheeseborough Road right here. One of the things that the applicant is suggesting that is being reviewed is whether or not this portion of the road needs to remain open, or if the cul-de-sac would be sufficient to close this portion of Cheeseborough Road.
Again, I would disagree with that because where you're going to enter onto 32 highway at the top of Cheeseborough is a blind hill.
Well, all of this would need to come back in front of council.
Anyways, just the things that I know about the road, I actually traveled down there because in my youth, we had a paper recycling location right at the end of this and we used it all the time. So very averse to it. But that exiting on that top side would be a hazard. fire department would be up there way too often.
And sorry, just for clarification, the reference to a cul-de-sac is what the applicant is proposing. It's not a final configuration at this point.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Oh, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, through you, your worship. It's vague to me, the reason for the cul-de-sac, it puts the northern portion, what, on a public road? Is that what it would do?
That's
And-
correct.
And does that therefore allow for development? Is that like housing development?
Yes, so this portion up here is zoned rural, but it currently can't be developed for any use because it doesn't have public road frontage. But there are other options for creating road frontage or potentially zoning it, because if you look at this portion here,
Mhm.
this piece used to be the old rail bed, which is now owned by this broader portion. Like, sorry, the surrounding land, like this piece of property. So the applicant, Mr. Nash, owns all of this portion. This is not road allowance any longer. This was the old rail bed. If you look south on this, this is the old rail bed going south here as well.
Back in the olden days when they used to go down into GAN.
Yes. Yes,
Mhm.
so currently this piece of property has no public road frontage. The intent is that a house could be built on it at some point. And so through this whole configuration, the proposal is to create road frontage and make this developable, as well as provide some access to the back portion of this property for residential development.
I'll have you follow up and then we'll go back to Councillor maybe.
I think I got that, is a cul-de-sac enough? Is that big enough to allow, or is it the future still allows for more public access or public road to build on?
So the future doesn't necessarily allow for that, and that's what needs to be looked at in more detail here in terms of how much public road frontage is necessary. The zoning bylaw requires, I believe it's 45 meters of public road frontage. But this is an atypical lot that doesn't have any, and so how much road frontage is necessary to provide adequate access for emergency vehicles, snowplow, that type of thing, rather than, there's no real reason to create 45 meters of road frontage when only 1 or 2 lots would benefit from it. So it's a balancing act to figure out what the right amount of frontage is.
So maybe Mr. Holliday can speak to the snowplow stuff, because I think that's part and parcel of why the cul-de-sac as well as emergency services.
Thank you. Through your worship. Currently, right now, there are 2 accesses from Cheeseborough Road out to County Road 32. And as Councillor maybe had pointed out, the southerly leg of this is a bit blind. Our plows in particular, we have to clear the intersection at both of those legs. So if we can reduce that down to 1 somehow as well, it would be beneficial to us, whether it's the south leg or some configuration of that. Like Marnie had said, we have to work that out yet, but certainly would be much easier for us operationally to maintain 1 road instead of 2 at the same location, coming out to County Road 32.
So that's part of the reason for the cul-de-sac, because if they were to stop up one of the roads, they need to be able to turn around.
That's correct.
So I'll let you have another clarify and then we'll go over to Councillor maybe.
Again, I'm sure this is an easy softball. But if you put in a cul-de-sac and you were putting in multiple homes back there, I don't know how big this property is. So if you were putting in 5 homes, would a cul-de-sac be of a size that each of those lots would have the appropriate amount of frontage? Mr. Nash is in the business of building. So I don't quite understand if we're transferring this unopened road allowance, and yet the whole purpose is to, with the cul-de-sacs, make sure that there's public road access to a development. Would in a year from now, in front of council, would it be, from the cul-de-sac, we'd like to build a road over here? I'm a little lost
I'll
on
let
that.
Marnie address that. Go
Thank you.
ahead.
Through you, currently this lot to the north is completely sterilized. It can't be built upon. No, because it has no public road frontage whatsoever. When you look at the water channels on this property, there's a 30-meter setback on either side of it. So there's really no subdivision potential back here. This is just to allow the opportunity that one house could, because the other thing, you have the rail setback as well, so there's limited area on this property that could be developed. So it's just 1 residential unit.
Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few points. That water course in December and in the spring, that piece of land was almost filled with water. That's the other thing that happened there. On Pike View, there's an entrance onto the adjacent property, and there's one on Cheeseboro now that enters that same property which is to the east. But on that western piece of property right now, there are mounds of soil. Again, MTO, when they did their new truck inspection station, all the soil was dumped down in here to be reprocessed, and it is still pretty full of soil and rock and such, that which is covering both those lots. I'm not sure really who owns either one at this moment, but it is being used as a soil recycling location. And with that other driveway that is actually off Cheeseboro at the top end toward 32 Highway, and does become, that map doesn't show any of that, of course. So the rail bed actually between the farm and the house on the east side of that road is where the road goes into that property. And most of that flat space has been used for soil storage or processing, as I said. So I don't know, I'm okay with the road closure. There's no problem there at all. But I do and am very concerned if we're going to use the top end of that Cheeseboro Road at 32, which is close to Pikeview. I see it as a danger to anybody who's living down in there because it's just too close. Because in front of these other houses at the 32 East, as they come traveling down through there, and it's easy for a lot of people doing 100 Ks, which they're not supposed to do, but that doesn't matter. If we're going to set up for an accident, I won't buy that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Fody, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I couldn't find, it wasn't in the presentation. For those that aren't familiar, this is a very small lot. That Cheeseboro Road, I doubt, is more than 300 to 400 feet in length before the proposed cul-de-sac. And then there'd be another 150 back onto Highway 32. It's a very small, short road with a very limited amount of acreage. And I just wanted to make that clear. I mean, case in point, if you look on this particular photo, to the barn roof on the right, the length of that barn versus the length of Cheeseboro Road, it'll kind of give you a good comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in that barn many a time. I don't know what the length is. I'm guessing about 150 feet. So it'd give you the 300-foot guesstimation on Cheeseboro.
Right. Sometimes it's hard to picture unless you've been on it or you know exactly where it is. So I appreciate that additional. And Marnie's trying to measure with her stick there on the 118 meters. So certainly not a lengthy, but it's those type of roadways that actually take just as long, if not longer, for our public works individuals to get them cleaned out, especially if there's a narrow turnaround or a lack of a turnaround, all of that kind of stuff. So 118 meters. So Councillor Maybe, and then I'll call the question.
Sorry for the follow-up. I guess my question is, if we pass this right now, this cul-de-sac, does that lock us into just using Cheeseboro and closing the other side, or is there more study on this actual traffic flow that's going to happen?
Go ahead.
Through the actual application that's in front of council is with respect to the closure of the road allowance. Any further reconfiguration of the road or changes in terms of land acquisition and road reconfiguration will be brought back to council.
So it's just to create the access for this to have frontage on Cheeseboro Road.
It doesn't even do that. It actually just closes the road allowance at this point, and then the road reconfiguration piece would be what's necessary to
Oh, okay.
create the road frontage.
So there's two stages to this. Got it. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to follow up, but doesn't it state about a cul-de-sac? Sorry, I'm just, sorry.
That the applicant
Because it
provide a design and
closes-
complete the construction of a cul-de-sac. So provide the design to us. We have to approve it before it can
Provide the
actually.
design. Okay, sorry, I misread that. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Operations and Planning Report SR 147 23, moved by Deputy Mayor Fody, seconded by Councillor Jameson. The council approved the servicing capacity allocation policy as attached to report SR 147 23. Motion is on the floor and up for discussion. Councillor maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. It's very interesting that we find that it's showing or saying that we have plenty of capacity for some future growth here. And we all know after our tour that we're looking at some deficiencies within the system, mainly in the storage. So how does this possibly affect that storage problem that we have? And again, question that all would be wondering, how does this affect my water bill, wastewater bill within the town or within the Lansdowne? And then a secondary question to that, is there grants or programs to assist in the development of our wastewater system? Since Bill 23 has been introduced, is there more provincial or federal money being funneled into us to help sort out these issues so that we can develop the lands? Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Holiday.
Thank you, through your worship. So the first part of your question, yes, we currently do have capacity, but we know that we have storage challenges. And that's why we've been working with JL Richards. They're looking at the big picture for us. They know what our short and long-term requirements are. The hydrogeological study that we're undertaking is going to point us in the direction of how much water capacity we have in terms of the drinking water, because you have to have the water coming in order to have the water going out. So we're looking first at that hydroge study, and from that we'll gain a sense of what our overall capacity for our aquifer is. And the storage component of that is being considered with that information coming from the hydroge as well. So we're looking at not only our short-term requirements, but also our long-term. Short-term, we feel that there are ways to deal with our capacity issues for storage. Longer term, we're likely looking at a water tower, but that's years down the road yet. So we're looking at a staged approach to address that. In terms of grants, at this point, we're not aware of any grants, but we are just doing the preliminary planning work right now. And then, from that, we'll have to move into the stage of the development of, plans and construction and all that type of stuff. And we're hoping that at that point that something will catch up to be able to help us fund this project. Because with the water system, it is to be funded, and I think Phil can speak to this better than I can, but it is to be funded by the users of that system. But we can apply grants and those types of things to that type of a project as well. So we're hopeful that something will come down. We're typically with a project like that, they like it to be shovel ready. So we're doing all of the preliminary work to get it shovel ready at this point. I think I answered.
So I'll add the planner's comments.
Thank you. So what this policy does is this allows us to actually allocate capacity, knowing what our upper limit is, while all of that other work is going on, which allows us to get more users on the system, allows us to allow development to proceed. With this policy, it sort of separates the capacity allocation from the planning approvals. So for a subdivision, we have to know that we have capacity, but it allows us to separate that capacity allocation from the planning process and put it into an administrative process. So it allows us to keep things moving while we're doing that other work in the interim.
Councillor Ralph, go ahead.
Thank you, and through your worship. What I find very interesting, and I just don't know how it plugs into the 20-some points, but it is the equivalent residential unit equivalency. It's based on a ratio. And I notice in the bottom, in the industrial, commercial, institutional, it doesn't have a ratio. And therefore, if a developer, some questions arise from that in a statement. One, if someone got an allocation, they're free to work with the equivalency between a detached home, I guess, single or semi-detached, or row houses. So it does give them room to configure. I think that's a good thing, right? Because the equivalency, the ratios are there, so they can play with the ratios, right? And the last question would be, if someone wanted to build light industrial on the west side of,
Center?
yeah, in that area, we don't show an equivalency. I just those are interesting. I think the report's great. It's just that popped into my mind. So again, to be clear, I'm a developer. I want to get a bunch of equivalency here. And I say, I want X. But does it spell out how I use X? Because the ratios allow me to play. That might be a good thing. I'm not sure.
We'll let the Director of Operations address that one.
Thank you, through your worship.
Rock, paper, scissors. Go
found-
ahead, Director Holliday.
Thank you. We found this to be common with other municipalities that are going through the same process, to leave that open. Because of the variability of those types of developments.
Mhm.
You know, a laundromat would use a lot more water than, say, an office would.
Yeah.
So to have that flexibility to evaluate them individually, we have to have that flexibility. Otherwise, we'd be trying to create ratios for every type of business that could exist.
So which thing is the industrial side? You just look at it and say, what type of industry or business is it? That kind of
Yes,
thing.
yeah,
Okay.
and we'd work with the developer
Okay.
to determine, you know,
Right.
what their requirements would be for water and sewer,
Sure.
and then evaluate it based on that.
One of the things I didn't say, but one of the things that interests me is affordability. And when you allow a ratio, in my humble opinion, if I was a developer and I had X capacity, I could provide perhaps some affordability by putting in townhouse, row house, and I'm assuming they're a little cheaper than detached homes and semi-detached. So it does allow flexibility for the developer to come in and strike a number of areas in terms of affordability.
That's
Is
a
that fair to
planning
say?
question. Go ahead.
So through you, just for some additional clarification around the industrial commercial, if anybody came in with an industrial commercial development, it would also be subject to site plan control, through which we'd require them to have a servicing report prepared by an engineer. And we would be asking them to give us their equivalency in terms of the equivalent residential units through that process. There's some assumptions made as it relates to infill development, so that if someone comes in with additional units, say under Bill 23 or existing vacant lots in the village, we know what we're dealing with as it relates to that. But then if we have a subdivision, as we have for the one proposed currently south of the tracks, there's also another servicing report related to that that's prepared by a professional engineer. If we've got this policy in place, they know what our process is. We've got our subdivision technical guideline standards in place. So this really establishes the rules of the game for anyone coming in to want to develop.
Which is what we lacked before. So in the absence of, this is the policy.
One last question, if I might.
Go ahead.
In that this is supply management 101. Sometimes in the oil industry, what they'll do is they'll break into blocks and saying, you know, you're bidding on this block and this block and that block. If we have this capacity that we're talking about of 161 equivalent units, do we need to consider breaking it into blocks, or do we just sort of take it as it comes to us? Because I know there's some exciting things on the horizon. Do we need to consider saying you have to take a minimum, you know, if you're a certain size, you need to take 50 equivalent units or 150 equivalent units? Is that something we need to consider, do you think? I'm not looking for an answer. I'm just wondering.
Different policies we looked at did it different ways. Some of them saved up all of the capacity allocation requests and administered them semi-annually. In this case, given the nature of the inquiries that we've been getting and the scale of development that's proposed, my concern with that approach was that we may hold somebody up that's ready to go because we say, well, we're not taking a report until October. So we structured it at this point so that it's more of a, as you come in, we'll evaluate it and we'll bring that report forward to council so we know what we're dealing with from a supply perspective. But if we get inundated with requests, we always can come back and reevaluate the policy and say,
Let's
this is how
hope
we're
that's
gonna
the
do it.
case.
Yes.
So-
Okay, so I have Counselor maybe and then Counselor Fody, and then I'm going to call the question because we still have quite a bit.
Sorry, just one more thing. At the bottom of this particular staff report, I noticed that the bylaw that's actually attached to it may be the incorrect one, number 23055, the road stoppage. So if you,
So that could be just the attachment is.
yeah,
wrong.
just in the wrong spot.
Okay,
Yeah.
the clerk has made a
Thanks.
note of that. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, your worship, and through you. Just on this graph here on page, if I could find the page, I give it to you. So I won't. With regards to where it blocks out the property land use status, residential dwellings. It's stating these are potentials. Residential dwelling units 124, equivalent population 312. What's our current status in the village of Lansdowne? Breaking it out the same way. How many residential dwellings do we have comparable to what our population is in the village?
I thought it was.
Do we know?
77. 177.
Like basically how many water meters might be an indication of to
Oh.
some degree.
I believe that we have 277
Oh,
services,
277. Sorry.
somewhere in the 277, 280 range.
Okay,
Off the top of my head from our meter replacement program, I believe that's where we're at.
okay, so an equivalent math would be, 2.5 times that for population. Which would take us
Based
up near
on-
800 people, perhaps.
Based on the information provided by our consultant, I believe that the number was slightly under 2.5 or around the 2.5 mark. They did give me that information.
Okay,
We do have an average based on all of the households, which we drew from the census, which is how we did the equivalent units.
Okay.
Based on the type of household and population of that, that's.
right. The reason I ask these questions, because it's inevitable after tonight's meeting, and every time we kind of touch on this generalization topic here with water, the residents are going to ask, what's this do to the village of Lansdowne? My quick math stated that it's gonna, this proposal, what we're asking for here tonight, would increase the density, if you will, by 30% and the population equally by another 30%. Round figures. It'll move the population from, say, 800 up to 1100. And it'll move the density from 277, or even if it was 250 residential units, to another 124 on top of that. So, I'm just trying to think, as those of us who are going to get inundated locally here with some questions, that we're kind of all on the same page with the right answer.
Go
And
ahead.
back to Councillor, if I may, Councillor Grell's comments about the industrial. Am I understanding this wrong? I thought the current applications were only applying to the east side at this point. Is that true or no?
Just to provide some clarification. So we currently don't have any applications for the west side. There was
Right.
an old plan, there was a plan of subdivision proposed there, but it was withdrawn. And the current subdivision we have proposed is for the east side. However, it doesn't preclude land that's currently zoned from being developed. So the industrial lands on the west side could be developed with a use that complies with the zoning, and we have to allocate capacity to that because it's zoned. So, and that's the same as existing lands within Lansdowne that are currently developed with single family homes on them. Under Bill 23. Those lots are each allowed to have 2 additional residential units on them. So we have to account for that capacity, because every time somebody introduces a new use or a new residential unit that's in accordance with our existing zoning bylaw, those units have to be subtracted from our potential capacity allocation.
Right. Okay.
So if someone wanted to put in a basement apartment, we can't, as long as they meet building code, we can't not allocate them.
Exactly. And so this isn't proposing any changes to zoning. The zoning for the village is the village. But what the official plan does is it establishes a boundary for Lansdowne. And the assumption is that all lands within that boundary are to be serviced by municipal water and sanitary. So we have to figure out how much capacity we actually have, how many units we can service. So this isn't changing any development. This isn't creating any new development. Everything still has to be developed in accordance with the zoning bylaw. And if there's approvals required, it still goes through the process of coming through council in a public meeting. it's just giving us a tool to say, we've got 124 units or 161 units and you get 5 or you get 1 or 2, because we also don't have the tool of site plan control approval anymore because the province has changed site plan control so that anything under 10 units is not subject to site plan control, which is another tool we would have used previously to look at capacity allocation. So this just helps us know what we're dealing with, the number of units we have, and allocate it accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Grow.
Sorry, and beg your indulgence and through you, your worship. In that we are supply managing, if a company, I didn't read all of the points that were well expressed, the few I touched on. But if someone went bankrupt and they were halfway through or whatever the case may be, does the township regain the control of it? So it's not like something like a quota that can be sold or auctioned or bought or anything like that? Or is that something we need to look at again? Maybe not a question tonight, but is that something that needs to be looked at? Were the lawyers happy with everything?
So Cunningham Swan did review this. There would be an agreement that would be required to allocate capacity that would be subject to council approval. And with that being said, the policy also does contemplate revoking capacity if somebody hasn't developed. So we're not tying up unused capacity.
So the policy covers all those things. Okay. With that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay, next item is operations report SR-156-23 tender RFT OPS 2023-022 mid-size truck. Moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the council approve the award of tender OPS 2023-02 for the acquisition of a mid-size truck to Petrie Ford Sales in the amount of $52,915.20, inclusive of net HST. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Lackey and then Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Worship, and through you. This is coming from operations, but I notice it's basically for being used in the planning department. So whose budget
Go ahead.
does that
Director.
come from?
Thank you, through your worship. This was included in the capital budget under the building department.
Okay. And sorry, Councillor, maybe go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. The old truck is a 2015 Chevy half-ton, and this looks like it's a Ford Ranger, which is a middle of the size range half-ton truck, or not really half-ton even. Is it adequate for the job, or was the half-ton better suited?
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, through your worship. After conversations with the building department, they felt that the large truck was a bit more than what they actually required. The largest piece of equipment that they haul would be obviously the boat, the building department boat. They did have concerns with clearance and protection of the underside of the vehicle. So the one that we tendered does have the required clearance that they were looking for, actually has more clearance than their current vehicle. And it does have the skid plates underneath it, but it'll be much more fuel efficient as well than what they're currently using.
Further comments or questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ford.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Along the same line as Councillor Maybe, is this a 4-wheel drive unit or 2? It is 2?
This is a 4-wheel drive
It
vehicle.
is 4-wheel and a single cab?
This is a crew cab.
Okay. The only hurtful part when I read this, a 2015 Chevy half-ton with this many miles, and it's deemed redundant. Mine's a 2000 Chevy half-ton with many more kilometers, and I don't see it as redundant, but
Just
that's
be,
just a personal note.
just be thankful no one's deemed you redundant at home, right?
If I mention that at home, it'll be a different.
So any further comments, questions? Okay, we'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Is carried. Thank you. 10.5 operations support SR-157-23 moved by Councillor Jameson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that council direct staff to proceed with finalizing design and tender preparation for the new fire station number 2. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have to ask for you, your worship, to the chief, is it all you've ever dreamed of?
Through your worship, yes, it looks very, from where we started to where we are now, it certainly fits our needs now and moving forward.
Okay. Any further comments or questions in regards to design? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fode.
Thank you, Your Worship. With some of the changes that were forced upon the layout here by CRCA, does this preclude us from any expansion in the future? Like, are we kind of landlocked by growing one more bay on the fire hall, for instance?
Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. We do have some challenges with the size of the hall, with the setbacks required from the CRCA. When we initially designed this, our thought was that the berm, the 30-meter setback from what was the wetland. But after conversations with CRCA, they take the bottom of the berm as being the edge of the wetland, even though it is just a stream that passes through the property. So that did create some challenges. Now we have, our consultant has really worked at this to work with Conservation Authority, and I thank the Director of Planning for that as well too. There was a bit of give and take on this site to construct what is there, with our required setbacks from the right of way to our required setbacks from the CRCA requirements, along with the challenges that we had with the minor variants that we had to overcome. You know, there have been some large hurdles that we've had to jump over. As a result, I think that the facility that we're constructing is about as big as we can make it at this point.
Follow up.
Thank you. Well, overlapping on to Councillor Lackey's comments, if the fire chief, this is everything he's ever dreamed of, then I like the report. I think it gives us what we're looking for as a fire hall. The location was made awesome by the offer from the neighbors out north there, the Sly brothers. And I'm looking forward to see, or maybe not looking forward to see what comes back on an RPF proposal.
Go ahead, Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Calvin. Okay. Oh, you didn't. I apologize. Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Again, it's a great looking building. I think the residents in the northern part will be much safer with its build. Director Holliday and myself have had conversations about this, and some of my questions have been clarified and explained and properly, I see the point of view. So I'm happy to see that we've made some gains, and we have a future building that will service the community in a much safer manner. Its location will be more central to the coverage area. It's built in a standard as a Butler building, steel construction, metal cladding, so it can withstand some of the climatic conditions that we may have in our future, but also as a service us as a, I was going to say rescue building, but it is, but in case of an emergency services, thank you. I had the word earlier today, but it just escaped me at the moment. But as an emergency shelter also for people in our area, if they need to, come to a place that's safe, warm, and has electricity, heat, and the facilities to use. It is a very attractive building. It's very close to the road because of our setbacks. We know that. So the signage is on the approaching directions, north and south, and nothing on the east, other than the big two, which is, pretty significant. I did notice in the drawing here that, I have like a copy right here, and it has the trees on the roadside. Are we stuck on having trees there? Do we have to have them? Is there some sort of planning permitted thing? Just that I see that if you're in an emergency and you need to find the fire department, any shrubbery out front could hinder a person missing it in the event that they need it. Like I've even seen that a Winnebago's caught fire and they pull into the lot and you put it out type thing. Or in emergency services where somebody's wanting some heart resuscitation and they can pull in. But if it's cladded in the front and you don't know what it is, I think we can put trees at the backside. We have a great big berm there that with water, the trees would love all that. So I'd just like to see that done. But yes, thank you, Director Holliday, for the great work that you have done in preparing this and working toward that, and the rest of the crew between the fire department, the planning, the whole area. I think our community will be well served by this great, wondrous new build that will help our future. Thank you.
Okay, any other, Councillor Calvin, go ahead.
Thank you through you. I just wanted to see if the director has an estimate on next steps for a timeline.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you through your worship. So we're at the 65 point rate now. I was talking with the consultant today. Their goal is to have this tender ready by the end of the month so that we can have the tender submissions provided to council for November and also for budget for 2024.
Excellent. Thank you for that estimated timeline. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Excuse me. Next item, 10.6 Administration Report SR-159-23 Physician Recruitment, Physician Experiential Locum Grant Policy. And the motion comes forward from Deputy Mayor Fody and seconded by Councillor Jameson. The council will grant 3 readings and final passage to bylaw number 23-053, being a bylaw to establish a physician experiential locum grant policy. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. This is just in support of physician recruitment. I must apologize to council. I thought I had brought this forward a couple of months ago, but it obviously didn't go forward. So this is just a bit of house cleaning or housekeeping on my end of things to get policy in front of council for its consideration of how we would have some governance and a framework around of dispersing funds should there be a taker on the experiential grant experience through one of the clinics in the township. Should also note that the town of Gananoque has passed a similar policy to mirror what we're doing.
Any further comments or questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I think I just said it the last time we looked at this report to thank you to the CAO and those that were involved in putting this together. It's a job really well done. I appreciate the effort from all of you.
Any other comments or questions?
Real good shot in the arm.
I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Just as an aside, without giving out too many details, this has already been successful. There's already been an application made to use the grant. So. Mhm. And so I think to the point that Councillor Lackey's made in regards to the efforts, I too appreciate the effort of the CAO and Deputy Mayor Fody and Jameson who've worked. I was on it in early days, but have punted it off to the other members, but along with the CAO, these are really creative ways that we're looking at supporting our physicians, our clinics in ways to get people here, because we know that once we get them here, we have a much better chance of getting them hooked. And who doesn't want to live here? So anyways, thank you for all the efforts. Next item on the agenda is moved by Councillor Garrell, seconded by Councillor Kelman, that the council direct the municipal clerk to issue a letter to the Sealy's Bay Area Residents Association acknowledging 2 small hall events scheduled on October 14th and November 25th as municipally significant for the purposes of Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario's special occasion permit process. So this is for information, basically to let us know that this is happening, and we're just making sure the public is aware. Yes, I realize that, but there's nothing nefarious or anything else. It's just letting people know that these events are happening and that there is a liquor license available for that. So any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. you haven't been to a small halls event, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to get tickets if they're not already sold out. So. I don't know. Are they sold out? Counselor Jameson, do you know? October 4th, 14th and November 25th. And I might have 2 tickets available because I won't be here. You'll take them. Okay. Because I think I bought them a while ago. Now I just recalled that. Anyways. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Counselor Jameson, refund of permit fees for Mr. Rombo, moved by Counselor Garrell and seconded by Counselor Kelman, that staff be directed to bring back a report regarding further information of Ray Rombo's request to refund his permit fees at the October 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting. Discussion on this motion? Go ahead, Counselor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could we just have a recap? Because it seems to me I recall that there were fees, there were things that were inspected while they were there that there wasn't permits for initially, but there was a ramp built because of his physical condition. There was a number of things. I just wondered if we just get a quick synopsis there of that.
I think that's the whole purpose of the request of the report, is to get a timeline of what was found and what transpired. Is that correct, Madam Planner?
That's correct, and clarify what fees were paid, because I think there was some confusion in terms of the presentation to council.
Okay, so that's what's coming forward in the report, if that satisfies you. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's carried. Next item. 10.9, Counselor Lackey. Rationalization of township services, moved by Counselor Lackey, seconded by Counselor Kelman, that staff be directed to bring back a report at the November 6th Committee of the Whole regarding the rationalization of township services since 2010 in order to meet our fiscal responsibilities to our taxpayers. So the motion's on the floor and up for discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just again to reiterate, it is our duty as council to provide what services we provide to our taxpayers, and basically what is rationalization. It's not micromanaging of staff, or do we have too much, too little? We could have either or. Basically what it is, and part of what you'll see in the dictionary is basically it's necessary for a company to increase revenue, decrease costs, basically to improve the bottom line. So I think it's our duty. It is our duty as council. And I'm just looking to get, they say, if you want to cut taxes, tell us what services you want to cut. That's what I've been told by staff over the years. So I guess I'm asking for those services, what services we provide, what they cost us, so that we could make changes, request that things be done differently. So that's kind of the background of where I was going with this, for the simple fact that, as I mentioned before, I've sat here a number of years, and I've seen the growth that does not match the growth of the township. Getting to that staff portion, there has been some positions that were very much needed in the form of HR, in the form of IT. One of the positions was a in-house mechanic, which was supposed to service our public works vehicles as well as our fire vehicles. So I mean, I'm not sitting here pointing fingers and saying we should do this, we should do that. I just think that there's some efficiencies when I look around this building and see where it started and what's become of it. This building was supposed to be good for 25 years, and that came from a consultant. Clearly he was not right, or we've done something differently than was expected. So I just want to get a grip on our services and whether we grow them, shrink them, keep them the same, and show us, where that money funnels into those services.
Okay. Comments or questions in regards to Counselor Lackey's points that are made here? Go ahead, Counselor.
Excuse me, through you, Your Worship. would a company or a group such as KPMG, do they still exist? Would that be the sort of organization that you would hire to do this? I'm not that familiar with the process. I appreciate what Councillor Lackey is suggesting. Sometimes I personally have the feeling that we're like Microsoft programming, it's just it gets put together year after year after year. And with our best efforts and understanding that certain departments have needed, there's been necessity. I think it is perhaps time for an overall review of that so that we're no longer no longer perceived as perhaps being put together like Microsoft. I'm not sure who should be doing that. Staff, it's like the fox looking after the chicken house. Is it an outside? Are we asking here that we look at an outside source to do it? Third party.
Like an efficiency consultant.
Yes.
So that being suggested, but I'm gonna recognize Councillor Jameson at this point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I see a point to some extent, except that I think in the context of going through annual business plans and budgets, which we have been doing now for, we'll be going into our fifth one. And the one we passed would be maybe it's our sixth one because we took a budget and passed it coming into this situation. And it turned out to be quite a remarkable budget and quite offside. But thanks to the treasurer we hired, we got it turned around. So the conditions that we're dealing with today, and as we move towards the budget process that we're about to move to, at that stage, our staff will be putting on the table what we will be needing to do next year, and that's and beyond, because that's in the context of now having an asset management plan. So by saying, well, let's go back 14 years. Well, 14 years we were not in the nobody talked about cybersecurity. Nobody talked about having to manage a unionized contract. So we've had a series of things that have come to us in recent years that have completely changed the structure of this staffing complement, and not a surprise. We went short on staff for a period of time, particularly in planning, where we were just not up to speed because we had trouble getting people. We made some adjustments because I spent some time looking at this, trying to rationalize, trying to figure out. I know we made some transitions in finance to accommodate people that were moving towards retirement. So it looked like we were ballooning a little bit, and then we settled down again. We had two clerks, effectively had two clerks for many, many years. Now we only have one. So, I mean, it's ebb and flow. We have HR, which we didn't have for some years, but it appears that in the context of the demands we have now, we need it. So I think that as a rationalization, each budget year, particularly ones that are trying to look farther ahead than 18 months to 24 months, you're looking 5 years, you're looking 10 years. It's like building this fire station. It's a 25-year run. So our vision needs to be way down the road. So I think looking back, sometimes people look back in anger, but not necessarily in a way that is constructive and helps us today. So on that basis, I don't really understand in some respects what the scope of this would be. And I don't see this as something the staff can take on because we have a budget process. We've got to make sure we've got a budget on the table in the next few weeks, and we've got to put their time into this. And we have challenges coming down as a result of Bill 23 and a whole bunch of other things that are putting incredible pressure on various departments, particularly our planning. massive increase in our building permits. My goodness, we're doing incredible business that we couldn't possibly have done 3 years ago because we were short, even though I guess business is better now than it was 3 years ago. So I think the budget process, and I think part of it is we call it a budget process. We should call it a business planning process that leads us to a budget which takes us to the next stage. So I think on that basis, we should keep the staff focused on our budget process, our business planning and budget process, and that maybe in that budget, we consider a review of how this has evolved over the last 14 years. And if we get a recommendation to seek outside help, that would be the time to consider it. But I think at this stage, to assign staff to do something before November is just going to derail our efforts to get to a budget. I'm not against it in principle. I just don't think it's practical at this moment. Thank you.
Okay. Further comments? I'll have Councillor or Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I agree with some of the points that Councillor Jameson just made. When I looked at this notice of motion, I too saw it as we deal with this annually on our budget. What we have now is this asset management plan, as Councillor Jameson mentioned, and it's critical. We all know the value of that tool. We assumed it was going to be as good as it was during the process, but it wasn't until it was finished and we actually worked with it, we found out just how valuable it really was. And I had to smile a minute ago, Councillor Jameson, when you said people look to the past. Sometimes they get angry. I won't sit here and spend the next 30 minutes talking about the year of 2010. It was a municipal election year, and you talk about angry. It was this building they were angry at, very angry, to the point where they upset a number of people sitting at the council table, including the mayor. So I don't want to go back to the past. I certainly don't want to go back that far because I quite frankly don't think it's relevant. Councillor Grell's point of looking at a
Third party.
A third party is the best word. Thank you. Bring them in at some point, to Councillor Jameson's point, in the new year, not any time before then. Wait till our budget is passed, and maybe we shouldn't even date it when it fits for the staff. Bring in a third party to review recent. How recent? We'll have to determine that as members of council, but I don't want to go back 2010. I think it's just too antiquated. It doesn't reflect anything to what we're doing now. Asset management plan would just be a key one. And we'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna recognize Councillor Maybe and then go back to you. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Again, it's a touchy subject. There's no question. Again, we have people who are hired from out of our area and they stay for a while and they move back. So those people disappear. We have to replace them. Then we have people who retire, and we've had many of them recently. So we have to replace some of those. And then, of course, there's some people that aren't a fit anymore. So they leave and we replace them. But our net gain and loss, we aren't too much different because we have had mandates from the provincial government. Okay, you have to do this. As we said, the asset plan, the building has increased. The Marnie, your department has increased. The Treasury Department has had more work to do. The operations, they've had more to do. There's increased work all over the board. So our net gain is very little here. As much as the faces have changed, the work is multiplied. So I don't see where we really have anything to really look into here. And I'll be perfectly blank. I don't see it because we've all sat here and we've commended everybody who brought those recommendations to us to fill positions, to replace people. And we know exactly who they are and why they were happening. And again, prior to 2-3 terms ago, 2 terms at least, we've had a better handle on it than almost anybody else in the past. So I think we've done very well in minimizing staff increase to manage the workload that's already here. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
I don't disagree with anybody on that side of the table at all. I think there is definitely been some legislation come down the pipe our way, and septic inspections being one of them. There's a list for sure. Like I said, and I noted positions that we didn't have that we really need now, which is, IT, which is HR, because we've grown. I just want to put it into perspective. I can tell you in 8 years, we went from 29 to 51. So you can say you don't see it. You remember getting these in the email? All I gotta do is count them. There wasn't a lot of science behind it. I can tell you that who grew? Planning grew by 5, Public Works grew by 8. Admin grew by 2. That's only in the last 8 years. So if we want to go back to 10, I only picked that because, again, that was when this building was designed for the staff at the time, which was built for expansion with many empty offices here, which was to have provided us with a facility to last 25 years that didn't last 8. So that's where I'm coming from. If it's the will of council, great. If it's not, I'll certainly be disappointed. I know a lot of residents will be too, because they're the ones that are paying for all of this. So, yeah, are we doing things better? Geez, I hope so. I don't get as many complaints, but maybe nobody likes me. So that could be that too. But I think it needs to seriously be looked at.
So I'll take any other comments from council before. Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
I guess as somebody who was a resident before I was on council, sitting up in the near north there in Ward 2, was always very disappointed by the neglect I think we felt on our roads, the neglect I think we felt from planning, the neglect in general. In the course of the time, particularly that last 2 years of the council before we had, things came to a grinding halt. And I think what has happened is we have put more resources into things that were sadly lacking. And yes, that means there are more bodies. I would rather invest in people to do the work than that out there, than continue on with what we were doing. And in the last 2 years, the level of complaints that I've had to deal with respect to virtually every service has dropped dramatically. I mean, it's gone very close to zero. Yes, they want to get more weeding up in the north end early in the season. And yes, the park should look better sooner. But the basic ongoing strength of the staff and the organization has meant that we have a winter roads plan we never had before. We've never had one. Now we have them. So I think that if we want to look at just a body count, it's relevant. But if we're looking at the service delivery, we can see from the services that we read our weekly reports that didn't exist before 2020, and they tell us how things are going, and they are going in the right direction. We had a fire service that, in my opinion, was on the edge of collapse at the point of which this particular roundtable came in, and that's gone in an incredibly different direction, and it makes us feel safe in my area to know they're there. So I take your point about more bodies. I used to put up with that when I had a big staff and a board, and I got beat up on a regular basis about the people I was bringing on. But at the end of the day, it's the NRAs, the net results achieved. And I think we're achieving those things. And I think we will use the budget process coming, to your point, to make sure that we are delivering on the promise. And the other thing I'll say is our taxes we pride ourselves in having the second lowest tax rates in the county, and up in Rideau Lakes, they pride themselves in saying we have one of the lowest tax rates in the county, but that hasn't necessarily served us well. And, I'm not any more interested in raising taxes, but I'm sure interested in seeing people's needs provided for. And I think where we're at right now is actually pretty darn good. And I think we should look to the budget to make sure the efficiencies going into next year. And the next few years are going to be tough. We've got interest rates to deal with. We're going to get some, what do you call it? Debt going because we're building a fire hall, by the way. These are all important and they're good things. And I think we should be proud of what we in the staff have achieved. And yes, let's be more efficient, but let's make sure in the context of what we need now and going forward.
Councillor Lackey, go ahead.
And by the way, the fire services is the only one that has never increased. Fire services is the only one that has never increased. Staff.
So I'm gonna recognize the CAO.
And I'm not finished yet. Thank you. And again, we do make these decisions on a weekly basis or monthly basis. And we just made one actually where I think we hired another halftime equivalent and provided a new truck to plow for another municipality. I'll say I voted for that because it seemed to make sense. But again, what was the benefit to our taxpayer?
So I'm gonna let the CAO respond here because he's been very quiet and patient. And then I'll go back to Councillor Jameson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship, and through you. I can't speak to what happened 14 years ago, but I seem to be getting tarred with whatever it was. And quite frankly, I hear it all the time. I know it's not your problem, but yeah, it is my problem. I can speak to what I've done since I've been here as a CAO. And I think my record stands for itself. If you want to go back 14 years and look at what other councils have done, that's great. We can tie up staff time or we can spend taxpayer money on a third party to go back and try to rationalize decisions that were made by councils that are long gone. But if that's council's will, that's their business. Just to correct one thing, I reported in 2022 on the net head count increase, and actually in fire services, they did increase. We went from a part-time chief and a full-time deputy and an assistant to a full-time chief. We eliminated the deputy. We had a fire prevention officer added, and we kept the assistant. So we went up a half. So you're not quite accurate on fire being the only one who has impacted. As far as revisiting the decision of council to hire a temporary seasonal operator to attend to the plowing, as we went through at council, the overall benefit to us is that we will have less deadheading, we'll have more efficient routes through the township, we'll be able to plow the township twice during a shift as opposed to once before the operators have to take a break. And we get, for the extra that it's going to take to plow Front of Young, we're getting compensated for it. So it's not costing the taxpayer a penny, and we get use of the sand dome in Front of Young. So it's more efficient for our fire or our plows to load up there than to come back to the depot here. So, we went through all those benefits. It's on the record. It's in the report on council if you care to read it.
Okay. So with those points, Councillor Jameson, you're good? Okay, so I'm going to read the motion again. Moved by Councillor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Kelman, that staff be directed to bring back a report at the November 6th Committee of the Whole meeting regarding the rationalization of township services since 2010 in order to meet our fiscal responsibilities to our taxpayers. So all those in favor of the motion at hand? All those opposed? And the motion is defeated. Okay. So we'll move on to the next item, which is zoning bylaw revision backyard chickens. Moved by Counselor Kelman, seconded by Counselor Correll, that staff be directed to undertake research regarding how other municipalities are approaching allowing hens in residential areas and conduct a survey to solicit public input regarding backyard chickens, and that staff bring forward a report outlining the results of the review and survey conducted and present options for council's consideration at a future committee of the whole meeting. Discussion on this motion. Counselor Lackey, do you have anything?
No, I just, I know this has been before council in the past, and I always thought it was, 2 chickens, no roosters. But I'm not sure if that was ever, officially, put in the books.
It means that maybe perhaps somebody did have 2 chickens, no rooster. But I think that the presenter wants to rationalize and have it legalized so that she can go forward. I'll have recognized Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you. I look at this a little different. If we're looking to approve someone to have chickens, we're basically forcing all our neighbors to accept them. That's where my issue is with this. I don't have an issue with the person wanting the chickens, but we're talking about a residential area. If we were to throw 6 chickens in our backyard, I don't anybody even know where they're there. But chickens, to my knowledge right now, don't qualify for the hidden protection zone like you can get for your dog. Your dog goes so far and knows better than to step over that line because they're wearing a collar. Maybe we get them fitted for chickens, but the point is, I can understand the applicant that was here asking this question and for all good and intensive purposes. But if we approve something like this in a residential setting, like I said, we're basically forcing all the neighbors to accept it. I wonder if we'd be so kind if the same applicant come forward wanting to release 6 pythons in the backyard.
Well, just to reiterate how the motion is written, and that staff bring forward a report outlining the results of a review and survey conducted and present options for council's consideration at a future committee of the whole. So it isn't that we would be approving allowing chickens, but that we're asking staff to provide options, if at all available, to mimic what has worked in other jurisdictions and what hasn't. So just to reiterate what motion is on the floor. Sorry, does anybody else have anything to say on this one? Okay. So I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay. We made it. Now it's the mayor's update. So it is September 11th today. So today is a National Day of Service and Remembrance. We remember all those heroes who forged on in the hours, days, and years that followed that terrible morning, September 11th, 2001. We will never forget those who lost and all those who gave their lives serving others. So if you haven't thought about today's date and what that means and how it changed our way of life, please take a moment to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice and all those people, those innocent people who were murdered unjustly at that time. So we have the OLG recognition event, which will be held on September 13th, which is Wednesday evening, and that will be at 5:30 in the town park. Yes, thank you. Linter's Turkey Fair will be held on September 16th from 10 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. So please, if you have not attended the Turkey Fair, please get your buttons. Please support your local event. There's a number of hardworking volunteers that have taken over this event that are looking to have great participation. So hopefully everybody can join us out there. Terry Fox Run will also be held on September 17th at 8 a.m. till noon, and that is at the Rockport Schoolhouse. Ridgeway Confections Truffle Shuffle will be held on September 24th, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The official Check Your Smoke Alarm Day is September 28th, and this year's theme is Saved by the Beep. It's important to test your smoke alarm at least once a month or according to manufacturer's recommendations. So if you know of somebody who's struggling with getting their batteries changed or not sure if their smoke alarms work, please have them reach out to our fire department. They are doing random checks and fire prevention work all the time, along with our firefighters. So if you, especially if you have an older loved one that you're not sure of, that please have them pop by and give a friendly visit, and they'll check batteries as well as make sure that the smoke alarm is up to date. Also, each year, September 30th marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This day honors the children who never returned home and the survivors of residential schools, as well as their families and communities. Public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component of the reconciliation process. So on September 30th, I ask each and every one of you to take a moment to think about those who didn't have a choice, those who were taken from families, and how that affected them, not just them, but families and generations to come, and what we can do to be more understanding and more compassionate towards those who live with the trauma that was a result of that way of life. Many moons before us, but it doesn't mean that we cannot be compassionate to those who have lived through it. So I think that is everything for announcements, unless anybody has an announcement they would like to make. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you were talking about 22 years ago, 9/11, I know we all wondered where we were, and it was easy to remember right what you were doing at that moment and where you were and who was around you. Councillor Fody, a few years back, and this is in remembrance of our fellow councillor who was passed on, Gord, who was very instrumental in Canada's military and how he was actually flying to Washington 2 days after, when there was no planes flying, as a very integral part of the intelligence community within North America to try to sort out this situation. So thank you, Gord, for your service to our country and to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements the council would like to put forward? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the confirmatory bylaw moved by Councillor Kelman, seconded by Councillor Correll, that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaws 23-052, 23-053, 23-054, 23-055. And that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaw number 23-056, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands at its September 5th Committee of the Whole meeting and September 11th Council meeting. Discussion on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Next item, non-debatable motion moved by Councillor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Kelman, that council adjourn. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we are carried. Thank you, everybody.